Welcome guys to the first lecture in our section, different color schemes. So in this section, I'm basically going to be talking about the different color schemes that are present in multiple video games, giving you a lot of examples of how it's used, and looking back on our previous section where we talked about the psychological impacts of color, seeing how using these types of colors with certain schemes could create a great emotional pull for the user. So without further ado, in this lecture, we're going to be talking about the basic color terminology, the definition of a color scheme, and the types of color schemes that are present. So looking at some terminology, so these are pretty much going to be the forefront of what's going to be used in the next few sections, so it's good to understand what they are. So the first one is a hue, which is any color. Chroma, which is the purity of a color. Saturation, which is the strength/weakness of a color. We then have shade, and this is done by mixing black to a pure color. A tint, which is done by mixing white to a pure color. Tone, this is done by adding gray to a pure color. And then value, so this is basically how light or dark a color is. Now looking at the definition of a color scheme, this is basically the choice of colors used or unused in some design format. And they are used to create a style or an appeal, and colors that create aesthetic feelings will often be used together for such schemes. So when looking at the different types of color schemes that are present, we can understand that mixing a few colors together will have a greater sense of tone or atmosphere or emotion for the player. As we've seen in the last section when we talked about the psychology of different colors, if we have a color scheme that has a lot of red and blue, well then we're going to have two conflicting theories, such as very energetic and aggressive red mixing with a very calm and essence blue. So we'll see in this lecture and entire section the different types of color schemes that exist and the ones that are shown in games. But basic color schemes will use two colors that come together well though. Unlike red and blue, we also know that there's different groups that work much more efficient together, that are dependent on each other. And the term color scheme can and does also refer to the use of colors outside of the typical media context, so such as military vehicles. We talk about military vehicles when we talk about their color scheme, we're talking about the patterns and the camouflage that is used. So what are the types of color schemes? Well, there's basically 6 major ones that are used, but there also is a few others as well. But the 6 major ones I'm going to be covering in this entire section are monochromatic, complementary, achromatic, analogous, triadic, and polychromatic, with the exception of a few other ones as well. And I'm going to go into further detail in this section about each one of these specifically and showing examples of their use in video games. And that's it guys for this lecture, and I'll see you guys in this next one.